r/Askreddit by Reddit tells. Redditors who rage quit a job without thinking. What was the last straw? I worked at a small family-owned restaurant for over a year. All I did was wash dishes. The owner hated me and always made my shift miserable because her creepy husband loved being around me and talking to me, and she accused me of hooking up with him more than once. My last straw was her calling me a filthy whore in front of not just my coworkers, but also some customers. I was 15. I know you were young, and it was a long time ago, but I've found a really fun phrases. You're displaying an awful lot of insecurity right now. You might want to get that looked at. Edit. Thanks for the gold, anonymous stranger. So this happened 2 weeks ago. I was going out with some friends and I tore my ACL. Told my boss I couldn't come in for a while because of this. I'm a chef, so there's no way I can work with a torn ACL. However, my boss failed to understand that and said that if I didn't come in the next day I would be let go. I quit on the spot. I feel like it's illegal to fire someone for an injury. Worked at a Red Lobster for a few years in college. Didn't really have any complaints. It was what it was. Right after graduating I moved to another town and was able to transfer to one near my new location. Worst experience of my life. Horrible management, and the location was in a relatively upscale part of town, so there were much better alternatives for seafood, so the customers were always shitty as well. We were required to be in 15 minutes prior to the start of our shift for a pre-shift meeting and changeover and stuff. Thing is, you couldn't clock in until 5 minutes before your scheduled start time. Like every other shitty company, Darden, the owner of Red Lobster, also a very shitty company, wanted to run skeleton crews to save money, so we were always scrambling. So often I would come in, and I would already have seated tables, plural, waiting for me. The host manager's mentality was, well, they need to be here 15 minutes early anyway, so if they can seat them 15 minutes early. Nothing seemed to ever clarify why this was wrong on many levels. Well, one day I came in and already had a seated table. Went over and greeted them immediately. They were upset but understanding, and then went to the bar to ask them to make some drinks. I couldn't enter them in the system since I couldn't clock in yet. While I was waiting for the drinks I was venting to a fellow server about it and mentioned if they seat me again before I can even clock in I'm done. Well, before I could even finish the sentence they had seated me again. I told the server I was talking to it was nice to have worked with them. Made sure to let both tables know they were seated in a section that didn't even have a server yet because the company didn't want to pay for a full staff and that they should dine at restaurants that care about them having a good experience, and walked out. No regrets, and I'll never give Darden a dime of my money ever again. I worked at a movie theater in my hometown all through high school. When I moved for college, I was able to transfer to a theater owned by the same company in my college town. The management at the new theater was absolutely terrible. They were demeaning to the staff, they fired people for not selling rewards cards, and they scheduled mandatory all-hands meeting with less than 1 week's notice. At one such meeting, 7 AM on a Sunday, by the way, some of my coworkers were falling asleep. To wake them up, our managers made us stand up, do 5 jumping jacks, and sit back down. They did this every time someone fell asleep during the 3-hour meeting. After around the 4th or 5th time, I decided I'd had enough and didn't stand for our punishment. My manager singled me out, asking why I refused to participate. I replied, "We are not children. Don't treat us like we are." I was 20 at the time. My manager replied by suspending me for a month, right there, in front of everyone. I promptly replied, "I'll just fucking quit," and never went back. No regrets. Now that made me feel good. I worked at a gas station deli, and right before I went in for my shift my mom called me to tell me my sister had been rushed to the hospital and that I needed to go there to be with the family. I called my manager and they said to find someone to cover your shift. I called a few people and one person said they would come in and cover my shift. I called manager back and let them know that so and so was covering my shift, and they said okay. I came in 2 days later for my next shift and the manager starts flipping out on me how they were ducked because I didn't show up for my shift. I proceeded to remind them that I had to go to the hospital for my sister and that so and so was covering my shift. She then proceeds to tell me how so and so didn't show up, therefore it was my fault and that I cost them money and all this bullshit. I was like, are you ducking kidding me? I'm sorry you were too methed out to remember our call, but I had a family emergency, so duck you and duck this place. I walked out the door and proceeded to duck them one more time. That's one thing that drove me crazy at my first job. You were responsible for making sure the person who was covering your shift showed up. If they no called no showed, you both got fired. IDK how normal that is though. I could be wrong, but isn't it 100% the responsibility of the manager to find people to cover shifts? I know that oftentimes employees will trade shifts or ask someone to cover a shift for them, and if that works that's totally fine. You need a good working environment, but when push comes to shove it's legally management's responsibility. I worked as one of those super annoying face-to-face fundraiser people. You know, those who will stand in your way and use every trick in the book to shame you into sending them money every month so they can continue their scam. Well, I did the one-day training, was sent out in the morning and quit after 2 hours. People hate you, for good reason, and treat you accordingly. I found out soon after how the money is really spent for the most part, and have been super against this specific type of fundraiser, especially since they ruin the face of actual fundraising. So now I just ignore them as good as possible, and warn my friends not to work for them. I talked to a guy, not sure if he was a low-life schemer or a smart fellow, who took a job like that, went out like you did, came to the same realization, and took off with the cash and paperwork after about 2 hours. He got $20 total, figured it was fair enough, and never went back for a paycheck. I did this, but door to door. I quit when the guy showing me the rope slide and told an old woman we were volunteers. I did this job too while I was on a working holiday in Australia. Awful job. Hated every single minute on it. The only good part is that now I have zero problem telling these people no when they try to stop me in the streets. It's kinda fun to watch the happy drain from their face when you just say you work for his recruitment agency. If they ever do manage to stop me, they know that I know. My wife was about to give birth, and I took the job as a temp thing. Was only there for 3 weeks. It just moved to the city. Worked there while I continued to look for an office job in engineering. The super I called to let know my wife was having contractions and her water broke. Told me to get to work, and that the baby wouldn't be born till later anyways. I said no, I'm driving my wife to the hospital now, and he told me to get the duck to work. I simply said I quit, and hung up on him. 10 days later I found a job, and have been employed here for 4 years now. I can't see any situation when somebody would react like that, unless that person suddenly found themselves in a game show where the objective was to say the most offensive thing possible over the phone. No, you can't help your wife give birth. Just get back to work. This is about power. Some people just want to be in control. It's a bad attitude to have. I hope more bosses understand that their role is to guide employees, not control them. Coworker told everyone that his wife's pregnant, so it wasn't a surprise. He's one of our key engineering guys. Really cool dude. He let us know roughly when the baby's expected to be born, give or take a few days, so that everyone could prepare for his absence. Then one day he just runs into the office, looks at the boss, and says wife is giving birth. Boss looked at him, pointed at the door and said go. Here the father gets 1 month of paid vacation when their child is born, and the timer starts the moment when the boss says go. Forcing someone to stay at work during such an important event in their life is just cruel. Was working my second job as a welder, booked 2 weeks holiday paid for a trip to Canada to see the now wife's family. The day before we are set to leave, my manager tells me he's going to have to cancel it as he's booked 3 people off on the same weeks. I explained I'd paid out thousands on a holiday. He then said I booked mine last, so I'd have to lose it. I spoke with everyone on site, yet no one else had holiday booked. I went to HR, and he was called in to explain. He came out with the same crap. HR backed him up. I said okay, got up, and walked off site. 45 phone call missed by the time I'd driven home. 1 voicemail demanding I get my ass back in or I'm fired. I called the owner and explained I'd quit and my reason. turned my phone off, and went in holiday. Aftermath. I returned from the holiday to nearly 50 voicemails from manager, telling me I'm in deep hitty CT and should watch my back when in public. Sent them all to a solicitor and police in case anything happened, along with sending former boss everything. He was dismissed, and I was offered his job as I'd been there longer than most of the team. Didn't accept as wanted to become self-employed, and it was the push I needed. Was in charge of a deployment of hundreds of computers in a school that had been ordered months before and stored in an open stationery cupboard that everyone could get into. I was there as a consultant, visiting once a week. One computer was found to be missing when I was setting them up months later. Was all but accused of being the thief, but never actually accused, which was odd as I was the one that discovered it missing and reported it. It was worth about £100. At the time, they were paying consultancy rates for me. £100 wouldn't have even got me for an hour. I have more computers at home than anyone else I know. I had absolutely no need of some cheap netbook thing for kids. I'd been there for 7+ years, deploying hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of hardware for them. They lost all my goodwill and I started looking for jobs that day and never went back. Moved on to working for a very prestigious school. Spent years there. The head left. The bursar, second in command effectively, was forced out by the new head. On his way out, he warned me what was going to happen. I was later accused of not doing my job properly, non-specific, which was my warning sign that they didn't understand anything that I did. They paid an equivalent guy at another school more than 3 months' salary to come in and audit my systems for a month. We couldn't stand each other. But I'll give him his due. He did his job. His report was hundreds of pages long, but boiled down to the guy's doing far more than he should be. The systems are far better than should be possible. The school are doing absolutely nothing they should be doing to help and are getting in his way at every turn. There was a short list of recommendations for me. Things like formally write down the password rules that the servers use. There was a much bigger section of the entire report that told the school to form committees, plan things properly, manage projects better on their end, give me more time, let me take my full holidays, which they hadn't done in years, pay me more, get me more staff, formalize their requirements, and do all kinds of things they had never bothered to do. I was called before the head, threatening me with all sorts if I didn't buck my ideas up. I was formally given my list of recommendations on an "if you don't improve all these by this deadline, you will be sacked" basis. They never published their lists of things they needed to do, but I was informed of them. I made an ultimatum there and then. You fix the items on your end of the report. Shock. They didn't realize I'd been furnished with a copy of that the guy you hired wrote, that you paid him to write, and I'll stay around. If you fail to do that, I will sack you, my employer. They agreed. I completed all mine that same afternoon, to the auditor's satisfaction. The deadline for this came a few months after. I suspected that they had done little. I booked a meeting. It was postponed, then cancelled. Then I had it put in their calendar by a formal process. Inside the meeting, they wouldn't let me speak from the start. I'll let them do their full diatribe. Even down to some guy that was nothing to do with it there, who walked into the meeting uninvited and who had brought in his laptop to show that nothing worked. However, I had a complete help desk with full history. Not a dicky bird about that unauthorized laptop that I'd literally never seen, and hence would never have been set up to actually work on the network in all the years I'd been there, had ever been filed. Oops. I waited my turn before dropping that on them and then asking them to leave. Then, to the head, I have, as per our agreement, fulfilled every element of your request months ago. Correct? They couldn't disagree. Could you point to a single item that the school was required to do that they've *EVENINITIATED*? They couldn't. Not even the official recommendation that says that you must decide who should be on an id-based committee when there is one id teacher, one id guy, and few others with an interest in such things. You couldn't even be bothered to write 2 names on a piece of paper in several months. Lots of nonsense and excuses. Cool. I understand completely. I quit. You'll have to serve your notice. I will fulfill all my legal obligations. I suggest you get someone to come in tomorrow to do my job, because I won't be here. We'll sue you. For breach of contract because you're leaving without notice. Actually, your own report and your own person, who I have literally *JUSG* visited, says not. You owe me 8 weeks of paid holiday that you have never let me take because I was so overworked, and which your predecessor guaranteed that I could roll over to this year because of that. My notice period is 8 weeks. You will therefore pay me for the next 2 months, but not see me again. You can't do that. I'd consult a legal expert on that if I were you. My wife's quite a good one. Stood up, left the meeting, left the building, never went back. I had literally nothing to go to, but just walked. I was so mad at them for not even bothering. They did pay me my money. A few hours later, a bigger better place caught wind of the whole thing and hired me on the spot. The school nearly collapsed. A few months later, several former members of staff, who were less prepared than I was, had the same thing happen to them. But they were much higher up, so many of them did the same, and then also dished all the dirt they knew to various agencies and ombudsmen. They were investigated top to bottom. Every senior member of staff was sacked, demoted or otherwise removed. The head was sacked. The governors were removed from the school. Pretty much all new staff top to bottom. It was then revealed that that was the second time that head had done that to a school. Don't accuse me of being a petty thief. Don't try to take my job from under me when I'm doing it more than properly. Don't try to just ignore my reasonable requests that you agreed to and think I will forget about. Check your paperwork if you're going to have an official meeting involving trying to get rid of staff. And don't be stupid to the people who know all your dirty secrets. Thank you for watching. Please like the video if you enjoyed. Comment with your own rage quitting experiences. Subscribe to the channel for more content.